Steve in Arizona. Hello, Steve.
Howdy, howdy.
Hey there.
How are you guys doing?
Doing good. What can we help you with tonight?
Well, basically, I'm here for education.
All right.
The last week or two, I've inserted myself into a couple of tweet threads and tried to discuss issues with individuals who are non-binary or trans, and I pretty much got hammered, and so I wanted to kind of come back and try to educate myself. So I went and I watched Alexander's videos, and then figured I would call into the show and kind of get some other information so that I am not as ignorant as I once was.
Well, that's a good instinct, and I commend you for that. Many people who got hammered on Twitter usually tend to shut off and not want to talk about it anymore. So the fact that you're here says a lot of good stuff about you. So,
and not just doubling down. I appreciate that.
Right? Good on you. So what can we help you with?
Well, first of all, like I said, I started watching some of Alexander's videos, and the primary one that I focused on was the one on the YouTube homepage for his channel, where he discusses what they view as. Excuse me if I get my pronouns incorrect, because I'm still trying. But what they described for themselves as being non-binary. And one of the things that they said was that non-binary is kind of a mixture between the two genders. And I'm wondering if that's basically the same thing as how you guys view it, or if there's something more that I should focus on.
Yeah, good question. So it's a little bit tricky because non-binary is a very big umbrella, and a lot of people fall underneath it, and they use the word differently. So for one person, it could be, I pick these two genders, man and woman, and I kind of mash them together and create my own gender or something new. Other people are absolutely not interested in either of those. They're like, I reject both. I am my own thing, and I'm directly in the middle. And then there are other people who are like, no, I'm all the way over here. Like, this is the spectrum here that we talk about. I'm all the way over here. I don't even like really consider it a spectrum at all. So there are many different ways to view gender. For myself, I kind of also vacillate between presenting more femme or presenting more masc, but I don't consider myself either a man or a woman. It is very much a kind of in the middle thing for me, and I'll lean one way or the other depending on the day. But so my only thought there is, ask the individual if you're interested, and they're open to talking about it, and you have that kind of relationship with them, what it means to them, because everybody is going to use the term non-binary a little bit differently. And anywhere else than on Twitter, in the middle of a Twitter feud, usually you will be given the benefit of the doubt if you make a little bit of an error there and assume that it's, oh, you're right in the middle, right? That's what this means. You're just androgynous and you're not either. They might go, oh, well, no, not actually. I'm pretty, on the femme side, and I like to present super womanly, super feminine, but I still consider myself non-binary. Okay, cool. That's their prerogative. But for the most part, it is going to be a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and one of the reasons why I was really kind of confused by it is because Alexander had indicated that they were both non-binary and trans, and I was trying to figure out how that meshes together, and you seem to have helped a bit with that understanding.
Right. Well,
before this past couple of weeks, I always assumed that non-binary and trans were essentially one and the same.
Mm-hmm. And they kind of are, and they kind of aren't. And again, like you're going to get a lot of these answers from me where it's like yes and no. Yay, non-binaries. Don't give any yes or no answers. It's always both and. But for a lot of people, they interpret the term trans as a different gender than the one they were assigned at birth. And because technically no one looks at a newborn baby and goes, it's a non-binary person, then every non-binary person is going to technically be trans in that way because their gender is different than the one they were assigned at birth. That said, sometimes people don't feel a lot of connection to that term, especially because there are very specific struggles and issues that binary trans people deal with that a lot of non-binary people haven't dealt with. Likewise, there are some issues that non-binary people deal with that binary trans people don't. So there is a difference in those two communities, and some people may pick one or the other, but there is a lot of overlap there. So I have a very close friend who does identify as trans and non-binary. Myself, I don't use the trans label just because I don't feel my experience matches what people assume the trans experience to be. So as much as I acknowledge that I am not the gender I was when I was assigned when I was born, I don't personally use that word. So there is a lot of overlap there. Hopefully that clarifies it a little bit.
It does help a bit. The next thing that I noticed in Lux's video was that there is discomfort when people sometimes use she/he or sir/ma'am, that makes them uncomfortable. How is somebody supposed to know before talking with them that would be an uncomfortable type of pronoun to use?
Yeah, and this is a ongoing conversation. So okay. We are working towards, collectively as a group of people, a lot of people in the queer community are working towards coming to a place where asking or giving your own pronouns when meeting someone becomes as simple as giving your name. So if you, we want to get it to a place where in the same way you wouldn't be offended if someone didn't know your name, but also you assume you need to ask someone's name. It's similar in the case of pronouns, right? We don't want people to feel bad if they get it wrong necessarily and make that assumption, but also the assumption should be, oh, I'm going to ask just to make sure and learn more about this person and who they authentically are. In the meantime, the best thing you can do, from my opinion, is to use gender neutral language whenever possible and then correct towards one or the other as needed. So I took a lot of time and effort before I even came out to myself as non-binary to move from saying she or he to them. And not only did it save me syllables, it also was more inclusive, right? So instead of saying ladies and gentlemen, you say hello, folks, or good evening, folks, or, whatever it is you would say, because they're usually gender neutral terms for whatever it is that you're saying. The sir, ma'am thing is still a little bit tricky because we don't really have a respectful gender neutral pronoun to use for somebody in a professional setting. So there are always going to be these sticky points until we revamp language enough to catch up to where we are as a society. But for now, for some practical things, try and get gender neutral language into your brain. It's difficult at first, but it gets easy. It's normal to me now to use they, to use person instead of man or woman. And also to offer your pronouns when you meet somebody. So instead of asking them to reveal something about themselves that they might not feel comfortable doing because they don't know if you're safe, they don't know if you're going to make fun of them or try to hurt them. Instead, what you do is you say, hi, my name's Steve. I go by he, him. How about you? What's your name? And then you've opened up that space to make it safe for the other person to decide if they want to share their pronouns with you. So I would say don't worry too much about being offensive when you're making the assumption, but be sure to correct it as much as you can as soon as you get that indication from the other person.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I recognize that all of this can sound a little overwhelming. And I just want to acknowledge that while also pointing out that it's much simpler than it may seem. You know, one of my favorite things about the culture I was raised in was when I went to get my driver's license as a teenager here in Texas. The driving manual had like an entire page and a half essay at the very beginning dedicated to explaining why they decided to use the word he rather than he/she, because that way they could save paper and ink, as opposed to just saying they all the way through the damn thing. It's not that, like, I hear how it was for them in writing it, a very confusing and baffling concept. But at the end of the day, using they, them is actually pretty intuitive. It just takes a little bit of getting used to.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems that I had, and I'm trying to get past it, is that they, them, their always sounds plural when I say it. And it's just because that's the way they've always been used in my life up to the last few weeks. But also, as an attorney, we often have clauses in contracts where they say exactly what you just said, that whenever you see a gender, it is to be interpreted as a gender-neutral term, even if it's he or she or whatever is being used. It's just kind of a standard. Now, I think I know your position on this, Vi, but Lux indicated in the video that the AM air might be a good replacement that can help people get past that little mental glitch. Do you guys agree with that, or is that something that you think should not be considered?
Neither of those options. I think that if somebody wants to go by AM air or zezemzer or whatever pronoun that works for them, they should be able to do that. I don't think it shouldn't be considered. I think that it's a viable option. I also say suck it up, because everybody does use they, them all the time whenever they're talking about somebody whose gender doesn't matter. So if you say, when's the plumber getting here? And the other person says, I don't know, they said they'd be here by noon. That's a single person, and everybody knows that only one plumber is showing up. It's just that in that context, the plumber doesn't need to have a gender, and so they is fine. So it's just getting that little bit of a roadblock, and it is a little bit uncomfortable, especially at first, but it also is grammatically correct. Because the dictionary now says so. And also it's been in use since the 1300s. So.
I was going to say, and has for hundreds of years. That's perhaps my favorite argument about all of this, is that we're dramatically trying to change the meaning of words when, no, like, this is old shit. This is just new debates and new frustrations around it.
Right. And it is awkward at first. It totally is, especially if you've only been doing it for a few weeks and you're only just now learning about this. Give yourself time. Be patient with yourself. Other people should be patient with you too as you start learning this. It's not going to be an on-off switch, but it's also a totally reasonable ask, I think. It's the same way as to me, it's about the same as saying, your name is too difficult for me to pronounce. Can I call you something else? Right? It's a little bit difficult maybe to pronounce a name that's not from your culture. Sure, but you shouldn't negate the fact that they have a name just because it's a little harder for you to talk to them at first, right? You're going to learn how to pronounce it if you care about that person, if you care about their humanity. And to me, it's the same with pronouns.
Mm-hmm. And I can understand that, but I guess I go back to like, I speak German as a second language. Mm-hmm. And they've got the C, das, and er. You've got a feminine, you've got a neutral, and you've got a masculine pronoun. And it is just so much easier when you've got a neutral that's already existing, just as kind of a switchover type of a situation. And we just don't have that in the English language yet.
Exactly.
I can easily see this becoming that way. But what's the best way to make that, to convince other people I mean, not just myself, because I'm trying, I'm doing what I can, but to convince other people to join me and join you in switching to that kind of a thing when they're just not used to it.
Yeah, I would say just do it yourself. Normalize it within the conversations that you have. And if you know people who go by they, them pronouns or air pronouns or, whichever pronouns they choose, make sure to stick up for that person. If you hear them being misgendered, oh, actually it's they, them. They go by they, them. That's just a thing that they do. And just normalize it in your own circle. You don't have any obligation to fix it for the rest of us. You learning yourself is enough. You normalizing it in your community, in your circle is enough. And my hope is that because internet and because Gen Z and because most school kids now, based on several surveys, know at least one non-binary person personally in their school, in their class, I think that this is just naturally going to be something that we incorporate into the language if we keep using it. So we don't have a gender neutral pronoun now. It might be they, them later. It might be air. It might be something else. But I think we're moving in that direction already, and we just have to get on board that train.
Okay.
And I don't mean to be too opportunist, but if you feel like you need to be more active than that, I can always remind you that Secular Sexuality is looking for Patreons. So please help support the show.
No problem on that too.
Sounds good.